The downfall of Game of Thrones shall go down as one of the greatest what could have been scenarios in television history. It's hard to argue against the first 4 seasons being the pinnacle of fantasy adaptations. However, the second half of the series was one hell of a roller coaster ride. Season 5 and 6 have some of the best episodes, but also some of the worst. Season 7 was the first season with a shorter episode count of only 7 instead of 10, and it was a very mixed result. And of course, the season finale of only 6 episodes is regarded as one of the biggest letdowns of all time. And you could argue it's tarnished the entire legacy of this show. Whenever we look back fondly at some of the most iconic moments in Thrones, Ned Stark's execution, Battle of Blackwater, the Red Wedding, Jon Snow leading the Night's Watch against the Wildling invaders, Hardhome, or the Battle of the Bastards. All that goes through my head is how badly it all ends, how everything leads to Season 8, with that terrible conclusion that nobody wanted. Bran the Broken, the character assassination of Daenerys Targaryen, Jon Snow becoming a meme, my queen, I don't want it. Arya Stark killing the Night King, all because nobody expected it. Jon Snow was too obvious. And speaking of Jon Snow, what about his parentage? Jon Snow's mother and father, R plus L equals J, is perhaps the most important theory in both the books and the show. But in the end, did it really matter? Then throw in all the plot holes and inconsistencies, such as your favourite Starks, Lannisters and Targaryens acting out of character just to serve the plot. It's obvious that Dan and Dave had their heads in a galaxy far, far away. But of course, George R. R. Martin not finishing the books is also a major element towards the downfall of Game of Thrones. Perhaps if the man had finished his books when he said he would, before the show caught up with his source material, we wouldn't never have gotten this mess in the first place. But 6 years later, 2025, we still haven't got The Winds of Winter. I think it's over 5,000 days now since The Dance of Dragons was released, just after Season 1 aired way back in 2011. But don't get me wrong, the show was deviating from the books way before they ran out of source material. And it was clear from around Season 4 that much of the fat from A Song of Ice and Fire had to be removed, and at times it was justified. Some characters and storylines had to be cut, some of which streamlined the show, made it easier to watch for the casual audience, whereas other fans debate to this very day that particular parts of Westeros history had to make its way from page onto the small screen, with Lady Stoneheart perhaps being the loudest argument. So with how Thrones ended, who really cared about potential spin-offs and prequels and sequels? I love A Song of Ice and Fire and Game of Thrones, but the ending left a bad taste in my mouth, like many. Like Daenerys after enduring the stallion heart ritual in Season 1. But don't worry Dany, even though you became the Mad Queen and had perhaps one of the biggest character assassinations of all time, we still love you. But she wasn't the only one. I'll give you guys a challenge. Name a character that wasn't turned into a weaker, lesser version of that character in the final season. So it was hard for me to ever sit down and rewatch Game of Thrones front to back, and I still haven't to this day. And I'm not sure if I ever will. But we move on, and we're in the era of spin-offs, prequels, and perhaps possible sequels now. Enter Blood Moon, the first Game of Thrones sequel, taking place thousands of years before the events of Game of Thrones. The series chronicles the world's descent from the golden age of heroes into its darkest hour. And only one thing is for sure, from the horrifying secrets of Westeros history to the true origin of the White Walkers, the mysteries of the East to the Starks of legend, it's not the story we think we know. And that story will remain untold, because supposedly the pilot was a mess. HBO quickly scrapped it. They dropped in, was it $20 million, but said, nope, back to basics. And thus, House of the Dragon was born, telling the story of the Targaryen Civil War, the Dance of the Dragons, adapting the book Fire and Blood. And even at this stage, I'm still on the fence, but it's obvious HBO put all their faith into House of the Dragon. Blood Moon had to go through the pilot stage. House of the Dragon got a full season greenlit from the very beginning, and Season 2 was greenlit very shortly after the first episode was a big success. And the rest is history. Season 1 was an excellent start that rekindled my love for everything A Song of Ice and Fire, with Daemon Targaryen becoming many people's favourite character. But don't get me wrong, the first season is far from perfect, and there are a few red flags, such as the infamous dragon pit scene. Several book changes have pissed me off, and it definitely felt rushed at times. But it was a solid 7-8 out of 10 for me. And after what happened to the main show, I was happy we were at least back. And we kept hearing about all the millions of viewers and how popular the show was on social media, and how superior it was to its fellow fantasy show Rings of Power on Amazon. And after season 1 aired with a very impressive finale, we were all hyped for season 2. Until of course we heard the dreaded news that HBO decided to cut 2 episodes from its flagship cash cow show, and House of the Dragon season 2 would only have 8 episodes instead of 10. What could possibly go wrong? After all, reducing the episode count done wonders for Thrones. And then we get to season 2, which in my eyes for the most part was a step down from season 1, with Blood and Cheese pissing pretty much everybody off, including George R.R. Martin, who wrote a now deleted infamous blog post where he complained about writers changing his work. And if you look at some of the changes in Game of Thrones, they were fine. Jon Snow being at Hardhome and Robb Stark becoming a more point of view character are high up on my list. However, many other changes were laughable at best, such as the show's disgraceful attempt at a Euron Greyjoy. But we all say that was all done without George R. R. Martin overseeing the production, because remember, he left after season 4 to focus on his books, and we all know how well he's doing with that. But he's back on board with HBO and is involved heavily in all shows, House of the Dragon and Night of the Seven Kingdoms, and the other spin-offs and prequels in the works. But it also seems like George R. R. Martin isn't God when it comes to the TV show version of A Song of Ice and Fire, and has a very limited say in what actually happens once the shows are in production. I think he's involved heavily when they're pitching ideas to him, but once he agrees to them, he's not God. And like I said, he was very pissed off with how they handled Blood and Cheese, and some other changes, but it was Blood and Cheese that stood out the most for him. And it's hard to find many people that disagree with that. But he was also a big fan of the show's version of Viserys Targaryen, and he said that character is better than the book counterpart. And I think we all agree that Paddy Considine and his version of King Viserys was one of the best characters on the show, and even though he made a cameo from Beyond the Grave in season 2, he was dearly missed. Another highlight for season 1, like I said, is Matt Smith's Daemon Targaryen. And look what they've done with him in season 2. And that Harrenhal side quest haunted mansion nonsense. I appreciate more of the mystical and magical elements from the books that the original show removed, but this was just awful. They didn't know what to do with Daemon and many other characters, because remember, Fire and Blood, it's a fictional history, and many main characters and important secondary characters don't feature heavily, so the writers have had to fill in the lines, fill in the blanks. And then we had the boring and tiresome Corlys Velaryon weekly shipping reports. And perhaps the biggest talking point is how heavily the writers are pushing the Rhaenyra and Alicent relationship. Aging down Alicent to match Rhaenyra's age was fine, and it added an interesting element to the relationship. Both are fine characters, but some of the writing, especially of Alicent, just feels so ridiculous. The constant sneaking behind enemy lines for secret meetings became mundane, and at times almost parody-like. The finale of season 2 is one of the worst episodes, probably is the worst episode in House of the Dragon, along with the the Green Council in season 1. But for a finale, the expectations were high and it just falls flat. It doesn't feel like a finale. It feels like a teaser for what's to come. And the first 2 episodes in season 3 were meant to be in season 2 as its finale. The Battle of the Gullet was meant to be the season 2 finale. But what do we get? We get Alicent offering up Aemond and Aegon, and I think at one point towards the end of this, they're totally going to have Alicent secretly turn on the Greens and join Rhaenyra and give her King's Landing and feel so sad about how she dies in the end. It's clearly obvious that having 2 lead female characters has gotten the writers very, very excited. And I get that it wasn't always the writers' fault, because HBO, above the writers, told them you have to cut 2 episodes, and I don't think they were given much time. But why would you take 2 episodes of House of the Dragon? Take them from some other show that nobody cares about, some show that no one's watching, that should be cancelled, not the top cash cow show. And like I said, they basically turned season 2 into a teaser trailer for what's to come. It was fan service, basically, just with White Walkers, Bloodraven, Daemon saying winter is coming, which is cringe at best. Of course, the Mother of Dragons shows up in a vision. And the Rhaenyra Alicent heart-to-heart at the end. It just doesn't make for an epic TV finale for the season. And it's clear reducing the episode count was a dumb idea. and we know season 3 will follow suit and have 8 episodes, and I believe they want to wrap this up in 4, so that's probably going to have 8 episodes as well. So 10 episodes season 1, and then 3 seasons of 8. So that's 6 episodes short of what we could have had. And even season 1, if it's 10 episode count, felt rushed at times, and there was so much missing. At the very beginning, George said you need 40 episodes to finish this. But season 3 does promise a gigantic opening with the Battle of the Gullet. But like I said, that should have happened last year, not in 2026. They're filming now, but we're going to get 2-year gaps between seasons. And that can really kill your show. People forget about it. Because if you go back to Game of Thrones, that became an annual event. Pretty much every April was Game of Thrones for 6 years, before season 7 had to take a little break. But in today's era, it seems like TV shows are just becoming so expensive and so difficult to make. And 2 years, at least, is the industry standard right now. And we're hearing rumours the writers are going to deviate from the books even further. And I am concerned that this is going to end in a very bad way. But of course, it wasn't all doom and gloom for season 2. The Battle of Rook's Rest is one of the best battles we've seen so far. Throwing dragons on screen and allowing them to tear each other apart is an easy win. The Sown, where the dragon seeds claim their dragons, is another strong point. The Bronze Fury Vermithor has perhaps the best entrance of any dragon we've seen so far. But if you remove all the glitz and glamour, a la the dragons, I also think some of the character development was strong in season 2, with Aegon II perhaps being the most improved character. Because in season 1, the writers done their best to tarnish him, to make him the bad guy, make him as sadistic as possible. He had no redeeming qualities. It was basically propaganda for Rhaenyra and the Blacks. The Greens were the bad guys, the Blacks, they done some bad stuff, mostly Daemon, but the show had you rooting for Rhaenyra. Whereas in season 2, they actually made Aegon feel more grounded, and at times relatable. Overall, there's a lot to love in season 2, but there's a lot to complain about as well. And the fans haven't forgotten how Thrones cut corners and tried to save time and money at the expense of quality and leaving behind a legacy. But let's hope season 3, with its mere 8 episode count, is a step up from season 2 and more towards the highlights from season 1. Like I say, I fear this legendary Targaryen civil war. By the end, we're going to be discussing what could have been. But guys, make sure you let me know your thoughts on the future of House of the Dragon and all the other Game of Thrones shows, whether they are prequels, spin-offs and potential sequels. What would you like to see in the future? I think we need to be realistic on when it comes to these new shows. I don't want this to turn into something such as the Star Wars and Marvel TV shows where they pumped out 1, 2 or more shows a year that are diminishing in both quality and viewership. But this year is all about the Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, one of the best works George R. R. Martin has ever written. It's a smaller scale story about a hedge knight and his loyal squire, Egg, who later becomes King Aegon V. And George R. R. Martin speaks highly of it, as he did with House of the Dragon of course. But my main concern is The Knight of the Seven Kingdoms is an incomplete story. There's only 3 novellas, and I think, was it between 7 and 11 George planned? It's nowhere near done, and we know what happened last time a TV show adapted a series that was not complete, and even went beyond the source material. So guys, thanks for watching, take care, and I'll see you soon.